$1 trillion. That is how much American families have spent last year for caring for their old parents. $1 trillion. To understand how large that is, think about Apple, Microsoft, Google. They all together made only $350 billion combined. And these are the most powerful companies on earth. So, American families gave almost 3 times that amount in care, and somehow it still was not enough. That is when this stops being just a family issue and it becomes one of the biggest hidden economies in the world. And it is not just in America. Japan is already the oldest country on earth. Around 29% of its people are over 65. Italy has more old people than children. China, well, they have more than 300 million people over 60. And Germany is importing nurses from India to care for their German grandparents. And finally, India. Well, India is walking into this almost unprepared. India has almost 150 million elderly people today, and by 2050, that number becomes 340 million people. So, more old people than children for the first time in our history. Most elderly Indians have no pension, and one serious hospitalization can push the family to bankruptcy. But wait, why am I telling you all about this? And why should you care? Because when your parents need care, your parents may be the patient, but you are the customer who will pay for the bills. And you're the person who will sign checks, transfer money, or start borrowing to take care of them. Because what else will you do? And this is exactly why this system is so powerful. It does not need your parents to be rich. It needs only you to love for them. So, before that moment comes for your family, we need to answer one question. Why will your parents getting old bankrupt you? Well, most of you think you already know the answer. A hospital bill, a big surgery, a cancer, an emergency stay. All of that can happen. But that is not the part that really scared me, because a hospital bill ends. Old age care does not. Well, if your parents need care every day, every month, and for years, your family becomes the payment system. And that is how I found Margaret and Tim Newcomb. Margaret was 69. She taught school for 35 years. And her husband, Tim, was 82 years old. He had dementia. And what surprised me was not his illness, but a shoe. So every morning, Margaret ties a small tag to Tim's shoelace. Her phone number is written on it because Tim wanders and he can walk out of the door and forget where he is. So if a stranger finds him, they can call her and bring him back home. That is care, not cure. No surgery fixes it, no discharge ends it. Someone has to watch him every day for years. And a memory care home would cost him about $8,000 a month. Their household income is about $6,000. So, care costs more than they earn. A home aide can cost tens of thousands of dollars a year. A nursing home can run past $100,000 a year. So, you are not paying a bill, you are paying a salary for someone slowly disappearing with no end date. And that is what makes care different from cure. Because cure has a treatment, cure has a calendar, cure has a discharge date. Care has an invoice for next month. And next month is precisely what destroys family. And nobody asks if they can afford it. The question is whether they can stop. They cannot, because the bill is attached to someone they love. And that is how love becomes the payment plan. Your parent may be the patient, but you become the customer. And this got me thinking, if you are paying so much, where does all this money truly going? I thought the answer would be obvious. Nurses, food, medicines, etc. But then I found something that disturbed me, right? Because typically and traditionally, these old age homes were part of a building that was owned by them. And they were spending money on your care. But something changed a couple of years ago. Well, the investors, they started buying the company and these homes. And the very first thing they do when they buy these old age homes is that they split it into two. So there is a company that runs the old age home, and then there's a company that will own the building. Now, what happens is that these old age homes have to start paying rent which typically they never did. Now they have to pay rent, they have to pay for your food, care, nurses, etc. And these rents can sometimes be as high as $500 million a year. Let me give you an example. In 2007, the Carlyle Group bought HCR Manor Care, one of the America's biggest nursing home chains. Then the buildings were sold. The homes kept operating inside them. But now these homes have to pay rent, and the rent was $470 million. That's nearly $500 million just in rent. And that rent is due before food, before supplies, before staff, and before the person is even in the bed. Rent always comes first. And that is the part that families never see. The invoice that you get says for care, but part of that bill can become rent. And when those costs are locked in, naturally the pressure goes downwards to staff, to food, to time, to attention, to the things that make care care. So Carlyle buys the chain, buildings get sold, they started getting rent, and money started pulling upwards. Manor Care goes bankrupt. The investors got paid early, and the patient had to absorb the collapse of this care. Now that is the model. Money moves up, pressure moves down, and the people at the bottom cannot walk away. So now the question changes. When investors take over a nursing home, do families just pay more or people die? I went looking for the data, not opinion. In 2024, economists at Wharton, NYU, and University of Chicago published a study in the Review of Financial Studies. They looked at more than 7 million patients and around 18,000 nursing homes. It asked what happens after private equity buys a nursing home. And the answer is that the mortality rate rises about 10%. The researchers estimated roughly 20,000 additional deaths over the years. Not a literal count of graves, but an estimate from the patient data. Because the cost of staffing is going up, the cost for drugs is going up, people get less attention. And that is the whole horror. Because in elder care, attention is the care. Someone noticing the fall, someone catching the infection. Well, when attention becomes a cost, care gets thinner. And when care gets thinner, old age gets dangerous fast. And this is not about blaming the nurses, because they are squeezed too. The point is the math. Families pay more, workers are stretched, residents get less, investors still get paid, and much of it can be legal. And by the way, if this is the kind of content you like to see more, I would really encourage you to support this channel by subscribing below, sharing this with your friends and family, and commenting down your thoughts. Okay, back to the video. So once you have seen this machine working in America, the question is simple. Where does it go next? Because anything that has worked effectively in America has to work globally. And India is where it gets dangerous. Because by 2050, there'll be 340 million old people in India. Because there's no other country that is adding old people at a rate this fast than anywhere else. That is a potential disaster waiting to happen. Because 1 in 4 Indians over 60 has pension. 1 in 4 has health insurance. And almost nobody has both. And in no country are the rules still unwritten. The money is already here, the laws are not. So is India about to walk into this, or this problem is already plaguing India? And I thought for myself that, it took 40 years in America, perhaps it's going to take longer for India to see this problem. But I was wrong, because the first thing I found was a single press release in January of 2023, where Morgan Stanley put in $9 million into an Indian senior care company called Atulya. Because this is literally the same kind of money I just told you about it a couple of minutes ago. Now this investment is into buying beds. They will go from 400 beds to 2,500. And this isn't one-off. Around 20 of these deals have happened in the last 2 years. So the investors weren't coming, they're already here. And I looked at why they were so interested, and that is when it actually scared me. Because India will have about 340 million people, you have to understand that this is a massive opportunity for them. 340 million, that is not a statistic. That is basically the entire population of United States, an entire America old. All of that at once in one country. This is the biggest wave of aging in human history. And it is going to the place which is least capable to solve for it right now. Because here is what is different from America. Well, in American stories, the families at least had something to lose first: savings, a house, a pension. In India, most people will not even have that. 3 out of 4 elderly Indians have no pension at all. And the government pension, well, that is not a lot as well. It's marginally better for people to thrive in tier 2 cities. So, the country is going towards the biggest problem. The government is not prepared. People do not have insurance. But, something is odd. And this is the part that got under my skin. Because I kept asking, how did we get here? Why was there no system at all? And then it hit me. There was a system. Now, this system was very unique to India in some sense. Because in India, people relied on families. When your grandparents were old, they were not sent to an old age home. They were not cared by a nurse. They were cared by their children and their grandchildren. And this system worked up until now. But now the families have become nuclear and the cost for care has gone through the roof. So do the math with me. 2 parents getting old, sometimes 2 in-laws on top of that, and 1 working son or daughter with their own kids and their own job expected to carry all of them alone. And no government behind them and no big family besides them anymore. That is not a line in some report. That is probably going to happen to you. And if you think about it, that perhaps the better option is to send for old age home. Well, last I checked, there is no law that says how many nurses should be there inside an old age home. And there is also no limit what they can charge you. So, I'm not exaggerating for effect. These are just blank spaces in the law right now. And when you start putting them all together at once, you start seeing one of the biggest disasters that people are not solving for. Okay, so that day is coming for your parents, for mine. The only real question left is, what do you do before it gets here? So here is what actually you can do to protect a family. First, get them covered now while they are still healthy and it feels unnecessary. Because here's how it actually works. The day a real diagnosis lands, the door slams shut. Most of the insurance companies will simply refuse to issue a new policy for an older person. So get them insured now while they are healthy. Second, the boring paperwork. Well, I know, but stay with me because this one quietly tears families apart. Without a nominee, without a will, your parents' own money will get frozen. So when you need to pay those hospital bills, you will be left with no easy alternative to settle that bill. And without a power of attorney, you cannot sell anything to pay off that care. And third, ask questions if you are considering for old age home. Well, in America, you can ask all sorts of questions and they are giving those information upfront. But in India, if you are deciding to go for an old age home, you need to know exactly who will be or how many nurses will be there at 3 in the morning when your parents need them the most. Okay, none of this was a financial advice. It is just one of the conversations I wish every family had before the worst night of their life. Instead of during it, I hope you are better prepared. You cannot outlove this system. I wish you could, but you can refuse to walk blindly into it. Okay, so remember the question how we started this video from? Why will your parents getting old bankrupt you? Now you know. It is because somewhere along the way, old age is quietly turned into a market and every market needs a customer. Someone who will pay no matter what. It did not pick the old person in the bed because they cannot pay. It picked the one standing next to the bed. The son, the daughter, the one who will hand over everything they have rather than walk away. So the system picked you. Your parent is the patient, but you were always the customer.